you, Ken. My heart is open. I feel free. And I'm ready to write a check. I think we're done here. I think you've done everything I needed to do today. Totally. I'm so happy to be here, and I want to thank Maura and Ken and Eric and Ross and Barb and Foster, whose spirit is here while his body may be in Europe. I want to thank all of you for supporting me in this endeavor. I'm Patrick Soran. I'm a ministerial student. I'm the editor of Creative Thought, and I'm a son, and the big thing I am is a husband. I'm a husband to this fellow right here named Mark Coulter. And I have to tell you that I'm a brainiac, and my brain starts in on freedom. And so I tell Mark, says, how's your talk going? Well, blah, 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 blah. And he says, well, what about this? Or what about that? Oh, thank heaven. So if you enjoyed the talk today, it was Mark. So thank you. I'm also an architect, and I was a travel writer. And I teach interior design at the Art Institute of Colorado. And I am the hippie in the song, and I think of life as a series of gigs. You know, life is a series of gigs. What's up? What's going on? How do we respond to that? What do we do with it? The topic of the month is freedom. And I spent a lot of time thinking about what to say about freedom and all the freedoms we have. We have so much in our nation, this wonderful sense of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is built right into those original documents. It's right there for us, undergirding everything we do in our daily life. And we know as religious scientists, as new thought thinkers and feelers, that we are free every moment of every day, that our spirit is free, that God created us free, that the idea of us is freedom, is choice, is love, is spirit bubbling out. In religious science, freedom is the birthright of every soul, Ernest Holmes says. We're free and in freedom every moment of every day. As conscious manifestations of the one spirit, we have the qualities of that spirit. We are that spirit. We are choice. We are created in choice. We have it with us right here, right now, to be the best and biggest human spirits on two legs that we can be. So why aren't we doing it? Why are we limiting ourselves? Why do we feel small or smallish? What's keeping us from doing that? I want to think about the Abraham Lincoln quote where he said, most people are about as happy as they choose to be. But I want to think about it as if most people are about as free as we choose to be. We have the freedom, but what are we doing with it? I want to tell you about our dog, Tucker. Tucker is a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel. He's about this big and about this tall, and he is a bundle of adorable love. Mark says he doesn't have brains, he has pudding. And you gotta believe it if you knew this dog. He's all love, but he won't fetch. He's not gonna fetch. And so he's very well trained and very well ordered, and we put him in a kennel every night, and every night we put him in the kennel and lock the door. In the morning we unlock the door and out comes Tucker. In the evening we put him in the kennel and lock the door. And in the morning we unlock the door and out comes Tucker. Well, one morning I wake up and I realize I didn't lock the kennel last night. So in my mind, Tucker is probably out in the dining room, and he's experiencing one of those pooch paintings where they're playing poker around the dining room table. Have you seen those ones where the dogs are playing? And there's beer cans and cigarette butts all over, and there's dancing pooches over in the living room. It's going to be chaos when I go in there. So I get up out of the bed and I glance at the kennel, headed to look for the... Tucker's in the kennel. The door is wide open. The door is wide open and Tucker's in the kennel. What kennel am I in? How many kennels am I living in? And the door is wide open. How many kennels are you living in? What kennel are you living in? And the door's open and available. All we have to do is get up and walk out that door. A relationship that feels good but not perfect. A job that pays the bills but isn't inspiring. A health program that consists of watching CSI reruns. And I take my daily meds. What are we stuck in? And how do we get unstuck? We're staying in our kennel when we could be outside living, moving, and having our being in our greatest yet to be. Ernest Holmes writes in The Science of Mind, people are created with the possibility of limitless freedom and left alone to discover for themselves how to use it. I have to discover for myself how to use that freedom. I have to make that choice. What keeps us on self-imposed lockdown in kennels of our own making? I think it's three things. Fear, limited beliefs, and unforgiveness. Fear, limited beliefs, and unforgiveness are keeping us from our greater yet to be. But how do we know? How do we recognize the kennel? How do we really see that we're in that kennel or sense it? Well, I don't know about you. But I know about me that I mentioned that I was an architect. I am an architect. I practiced for many years. And during the last sort of phase of that, I found that I was working for a terrific firm. We did world-class work all over the country. We were winning awards. It was the perfect job. And yet I found myself taking the longest route to get to work every morning, because I didn't want to get there until exactly 8 o'clock. I found myself not really wanting to be there. I found myself walking out the door at 5 of noon for lunch and struggling to get back in the door at 1 o'clock. My stomach was churning when I thought about all of that responsibility that I had. I knew that I was in a kennel. But you know what? Being an architect is a pretty good-looking kennel. You might think of it as a gilded kennel. I had status. I had gone to college for 8 years to get a bachelor's degree and 2 more years for a master, and 3 years of apprenticeship. I'm not going to give that up lightly, but I knew I had to do something. I was stuck. I was in a kennel. So, I want to tell you about the monk. There's a monk. And the monk goes to his guru and says, I don't know about this day-to-day kind of thing. I don't know what I should be doing or how I should be being. And the monk says, well, go down to the river. Go down to the river. So the monk goes down to the river. And he packs up his kit, his little pillow, what are those comfy little pillows we sit on? And when he takes it up right up to the river's edge, he's eager, and he sits on the pillow, and the river's a little scary. First of all, it's a very big river, and the river has waves, and there's, in fact, snakes, and there's alligators, and there's all kinds of stuff in the river. So he thinks, I'll move back a little bit. I'll step back from the river just a little bit. And so he sits back, and he sits. It's perfect. I can just sit and watch the river. And the river's going by, and the river's going by. And the monk notices after several days, nothing's changing. His doubts haven't changed. His thinking hasn't changed. He's the same monk he was. He wanted to find out what the whole point was, and it's just him and the river. He thinks, well, I'll go talk to the guru tomorrow and ask him again what the meaning of life is. And then out of the forest, right behind him, he hears a noise. And the noise is a monkey. He hasn't seen a monkey before here. And the monkey comes ripping out of the forest and across the sand and right into the middle of the river. And the monkey is playing with the otters and swimming in the water and splashing and carrying on. And the monk thinks to himself, finally, it's not about watching the river. It's about getting into the river. It's about getting into the flow of life, getting into all of that, getting into playing with the otters, getting into the mess with the crocodiles, having the fish flow by. All of that is the river of life. And to be us, we have to jump into it. We have to make the decision to choose. We have to get beyond not choosing. If I'm sitting on the river watching my life go by, isn't it beautiful? Gilded candle, yay, go me! But my life is passing me by. And that's not the point of life. Well, that's my life. Some days I'm the monk, and some days I'm the monkey. And some days I put the monk in monkey. We all are that. There are areas of our lives where we're in and out of the river. We jump in with some areas, we're right there with it. In other areas, we're not quite there with it. So, with my job, I was in the kennel of fear. I was on the edge of that. So we talked about Tucker the dog. And so I want to teach you Tucker's training tips today. Tucker's training tip number 1. Get up and get out of the kennel. It's pretty simple. Get up and get out of the kennel. Get out and into the stream of life. Go through the open doors. Go through the open doors. How did I go through the open doors? Well, it's funny how when we're in a set of stressy circumstances like that, if we pay attention, things are showing up for us. What showed up for me was an ad in the Learning Center catalog to take a class in travel writing and photography. So here I am dreading my job. I look at this catalog and it says travel writing and photography. And suddenly my whole being lights up. Am I going to take this class? You think? Yeah, I'm going to take that class. So I took that class, and in the morning we learned how to write a story and sell it to newspapers and magazines. And in the afternoon we learned how to take photographs and sell those. Back in the days of film, you actually film through a camera. And we learned how to I became a travel writer and photographer. So I'd rig trips as an architect and go on business trips and stay the weekend and learn to write stories and traveled the world on other people's money, which is a pretty good way to travel the world. It's a great way to live. It's not a great way to make a living, but it's a very rewarding way to live. Even if you're afraid, the fear is telling us something. No matter what we're afraid of, that fear is something we need to face, to look at. And only look at it so long because that's the river going by. And our intuition tells us what we need to do, how to jump into it. My favorite quote of all time, and believe me, in ministerial school, we are full of quotations. Georgia O'Keeffe says, "I've been absolutely terrified every moment of my life, and I've never let it keep me from doing a single thing I wanted to do." That's me, I'm Georgia. Hi, I'm Georgia. I've been absolutely terrified every moment of my life, and I've never let it keep me from doing a single thing that I wanted to do. Georgia O'Keeffe jumped into the middle of life. She's a great example. The second thing that keeps us living in our kennel are limited beliefs. O'Keeffe was born in Wisconsin, studied classical painting at the Art Institute in Chicago and the Art Students League in New York. But O'Keeffe abandoned the idea of pursuing a career as an artist in the fall of 1908, she said, claiming that she could never distinguish herself as an artist within the classical tradition, which had formed the basis of her training. She went to Chicago, back to Chicago, and she didn't paint a thing for 4 years. She just stopped. She had jumped in, but she stopped. She was stuck, just like I became stuck. Sometimes we jump out of that kennel door, we jump into the river, and then realize we have a whole lot of baggage. I jumped into the river with a lot of baggage. Oh my gosh. She didn't believe she could paint. I didn't believe that I could write and photograph. I went from being an architect to live in my creativity as a writer and photographer, and then I went, how do I do this? I don't know about her, but in my family of origin, here's some of my baggage. Pat, it's good that you want to be an actor. This is Pat. Imagine Pat right here. Big glasses. Crew cut. Pat, it's great that you want to be an actor, but you should have something to fall back on. How many times have we heard that? Pat, if you're not going to use the art supplies seriously, don't use the art supplies. I've still got baggage around that one. Oh, here, this is a great one for me. Don't start something you're not going to finish. Don't start something if you're not going to finish it. So there I am, trying to become this great travel writer, photographer, and see the world and do all the things that there is to do, and I feel frozen. Tucker's training tip number 2, be willing to reinvent yourself. Once we step outside that comfort zone, we have to be willing to reinvent ourselves. That's a great concept. We have a whole wing of thought here in religious science. It's called a mental equivalent. We have to be willing to grow that mental equivalent. We have to be willing to feed it and talk to it and show it pictures and show it movies and pick mentors and ask mentors and let that grow. Learn new skills. Georgia O'Keeffe learned new skills. She couldn't be a classical painter. We would never have heard of her. But she found a teacher in Chicago who taught her more about line and color. And on her own, she figured out that if for her voice, for Georgia O'Keeffe's voice, if she got right up on the skull, if she got right into that, if she got right into that flower, oh, look at Georgia O'Keeffe. That it became a great new way of art. It became a great new way of living for her. And she developed those skills. She became new. She reinvented herself. Well, as life would have it, she followed Tucker's tip number 1. Go through the open doors. Get out of the kennel. She went from Chicago. She became a teacher in Texas. She was invited many times to studios and workshops in North and South Carolina. Her work ended up in the atelier of Alfred Stieglitz, the great photographer and gallery entrepreneur, and they ended up having a relationship. But her art became well known. She became her greatest yet to be, her greatest yet to then. And then she decided that kind of wasn't working for her either, and she needed to step up to something even grander. And she had this call, an intuition, to come to New Mexico, to be out in the desert. And she went to Taos. She experienced Taos. She went back and forth many times. She ended up buying a place at Ghost Ranch. And the rest is kind of history. We all know who Georgia O'Keeffe is. We know this amazing painter. If you go to Santa Fe, you can go to her museum. They have an amazing gallery here. And a lot of what we think of as Southwest art in its modern version is Georgia O'Keeffe. Anytime we see a painting right up close, it's making a 2D, a two-dimensional composition on a painting, that's Georgia O'Keeffe. Thanks, Georgia, for following Tucker's tips. Well done. Well, I did it too. I took a photography classes and I joined a really honest writing workshop. I have to say, as a creative person, the smartest thing I ever did was join a writing group of people who didn't particularly like me. They cared for me, they loved me, and they loved me enough to tell me when my writing wasn't that good. It wasn't all pat you on the back, you're doing a great job. It was, you know, you really buried the lead here, and your sentence structure is really boring, and da-da-da-da-da. And I pushed it, and I pushed it, and I pushed it. And I became that writer I wanted to become. I had that career I wanted to have. And let's face it, at our ages, we have to be smart. We have to be a little clever. We have to use what we've grown in our lives. We have to use that mental equivalent. Here's a little poem I wrote to express my thought about changing our beliefs. I'm too old and I'm too fat. I'm too this and I'm too that. But Spirit says, be serious. You know I think you're glorious. And besides, I made you devious. As a ministerial student, I am not encouraging you to be devious. I would lose whatever license I have so far. But I am saying it just rhymes with glorious and serious. What can we use? What do we bring to it? What do we already have? And we honor it. We don't set it aside and say, oh, it's only this and it's only that. It's who we are. It's who we've become. Let's celebrate it and move into it and be the greatest right here now as we move into that greatest yet to be. We have to be prepared to use our experiences to our advantage. And so that brings us to Tucker's training tip number 3, forgive and grow big. Forgive and grow big. It's that simple. Move on. If we're pointing a finger at others, there are 3 fingers pointing back at me. If I'm pointing at you, there are 3 fingers pointing at me. I'm in blame. I'm in victimology. We need to forgive. What's my part? I know I can't control what happened to us as kids or even as adults, but we can control what we do with that. Deal with it. Step up. Move on. Living well is the best revenge. Guess what? Living large is the best revenge. Living a big life is great. Well, not revenge. It's who I am authentically. It's not revenge about what happened. It's forgiving and moving into that greatest yet to be. We've all had things that happen to us. Jean-Paul Sartre says, freedom is what you do with what's been done to you. Freedom is what we do with what's been done to us. And here's my thing. If it weren't for alcoholism, bad parenting, and the Roman Catholic Church, none of us would be here. There'd be like 2 people way in the back. Thank you God, thank you for all that. Because it got me here. It got me here. And what I realized as I was thinking about that, it doesn't matter what forgiveness work we do, just that we do forgiveness work. My experience is that the first time I did it, every mom, dad, and grandma were huge. And then the next time I did it, mom, dad, and grandma, they were a little smaller. Then they got a little smaller. Then they did a little smaller. I had an experience a few weekends ago in a workshop, and we were asked to do some forgiveness work. Mom, dad, and grandma weren't even on the list anymore. It's about persistence. It's about willingness to chip away that first little piece and let it go. Let it go. We need, get off the cross, we need the wood. Reverend Cynthia James asks, what will you do with all of the space that you have in consciousness once you forgive the people who hurt you? What will I do with all of the space in my consciousness once I've forgiven all of those people who hurt me? I have acres of pain. Well, if I let go of that pain, I have acres of exploration and acres of mental equivalent and acres of getting out of the kennel and reinventing myself and moving into my great life. So that's tip number 3. Forgive and grow big. 3 tips. Tucker's training tips to get out of the kennel of our own making, the gilded kennel, and begin living the life we want, the life of our dreams. Get out of the kennel, reinvent yourself, forgive and grow big. 3 simple, I didn't say they were easy, simple steps. So I'd like to read a poem that I think summarizes all this. It's by a fellow named David Whyte, W-H-Y-T-E, if you follow poetry. He's amazing. He writes, what you can plan is too small for you to live. What you can live wholeheartedly will make plans enough for the vitality hidden in your sleep. To be human is to become visible, while carrying what is hidden as a gift to others. To remember the other world in this world is to live in your true inheritance. You are not a troubled guest on this earth. You are not an accident amidst other accidents. You are invited from another greatest night than the sleep from which you have just emerged. From the kennel you have stepped out of. So let's take a moment and have a prayer.